So at HuntStand, we talk a lot about e-scouting from like a really granular perspective. Once you've got a hunting property, you've kind of learned what's going on to some degree. You use it to strategize and really break down the property in detail. But doing it from a macro perspective can be really helpful as well. Just kind of like with your regular flow of hunting activities, whether you're just bouncing around different properties or hunting public land. But also, if you are looking to prospect hunting leases, a great way to do that is with HuntStand as well. And you don't have to go into a super deep dive, but there are some high-level things you can easily identify as you're looking for potential properties where you might want to knock on a door or see if it's available for lease. So we're going to go through some of those considerations right now. We're not going to cover everything possible. You know, it's kind of endless, but we're going to go through a bunch of common scenarios that you can use HuntStand for as you're trying to prospect for a hunting lease. One of the first things you're going to want to ask yourself is what type of habitat is available to work with. Is the property likely to hold deer year-round, or is it a better spot for only certain parts of the season? If so, then you could consider multiple leases to hunt different parts of the season. So an example I'll give you right here, if you look at this map, it's just really easy for me to see. You got this property in the center here where you've got this beltway that connects to two larger systems. Now, would I want to lease one of these parcels right here by itself and expect a lot of results to be able to hunt the whole season? Maybe, but depending on other dynamics going on around there, maybe not. But what I can tell you is if you look at how that property ties into everything else around it, odds are it's going to be a pretty good rut funnel. I bet you if you sat there all day sits for a week during the rut, that you'd have some bucks cruise through there and maybe one that you'd want to shoot. So that's an easy thing you can do. Just kind of look at parcels and how they tie into the bigger system, and then consider what type of seasonal hunting you're going to be able to do there, or if you'll be able to hunt it all season. Another obvious thing to consider, which there's a lot of here in this view, agricultural land. Now, you might go to a different part of the country and find that there's not going to be as much agricultural land. Or on the flip side, there might be so much that it's overwhelming. So you're going to want to identify some nuances and figure out what's going to be meaningful to you for when you are most likely to plan to hunt. In this area right here, tons of agriculture, but what type of agriculture are they actually running? Well, one of the things you can use in HuntStand is the crop history overlay. So that's going to give you an idea of what has been planted there in past years, and you can identify trends with that. So if you see something like a cornfield, there's a good chance that it'll be in rotation with soybeans. That happens in a lot of different parts of the country where they'll rotate corn and soybeans year to year. Or if you see something that is in alfalfa, like this parcel we see here right in the center, a lot of times alfalfa is going to be alfalfa every year. Now, that's not a guarantee, but as you start to analyze this stuff more, you're going to find some common trends like that that are generally pretty reliable, at least to give you a perspective of what's going on. But when you're in areas that have more limited agriculture, that crop history layer can also be very helpful, because naturally it's probably going to be a food source for those deer at some point during the year. So you're going to want to know what is likely to be planted and when, and how that's going to fit into your whole seasonal strategy. So if you just like hunting early season, maybe you're going to want to have a property that is near alfalfa or some early season greens or anything that those deer are going to be munching on early. Or if you like to do a lot of late season hunting, maybe you want to find an area that has more late season food sources like standing corn that's still likely to be there in the late season. Or if you get a lease with standing corn on it and you don't want to plant food plots or you're not allowed to, maybe you could toss some extra cash to that farmer to leave some of that agricultural corn in the ground that he's already planted. Another huge factor that you're going to want to look out for that can often be the main limiting factor for deer habitat on any given property, no matter where you look in the country, it would be water sources. So HuntStand is a great way to identify water sources. We've got a number of different views, aerial imagery and overlays that you can use to find water sources. That gives you a lot of very detailed visibility into where all those water sources are going to be, whether they be streams that are flowing consistently all year, or whether they're just going to be more drought dependent or water dependent water sources, just like small ponds or stuff like that, that might only be there at certain parts of the year, depending on what's going on with rainfall. Whereas you got running water, is it likely to be running all year no matter what the conditions are? Where's that water flowing from? How consistent is it going to be throughout the year? And is it going to be running fast enough in an area where you're hunting in the winter where it's going to keep open water so those deer have a consistent water source? Water is one of those things that's often really overlooked. So I would encourage you to take a hard look at what the water situation looks like around those areas where you're thinking about getting a hunting lease. And if you got water on a property and nobody else around you does, it could be the linchpin to find a really, really killer deer property. Another thing that might be important to you is it more likely to be a good archery property or a firearm property, maybe a muzzleloader season property in the late season, or a combination of all of them? If it's just going to be a lot of contiguous timber, like maybe you look at this parcel right here, and that's all you got, yeah, you can hunt in there with a rifle and you can hunt in there with a bow. It's probably a better bow hunting property because you're not going to have longer shot distances. But you bump out and you look at some of these other properties around here, like this one, for instance, and you kind of got the best of both worlds. And one of the ways that you can evaluate that is to consider what your potential shooting distances are going to be if you do like firearm hunting or rifle hunting or slug gun or muzzleloader, no matter what type of firearm you're using. If you want to be able to stretch out that extended distance, then one way you can do that is by using the distance measurement tool in HuntStand and actually kind of get an idea, okay, if I put a tower blind right here, how far am I going to be able to shoot safely on this property and within my own ethical shooting distance to be able to maximize the capability of the platform that I'm choosing to hunt with. So another great way to use HuntStand, use that distance measurement tool. Now, I guess I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. I was already talking about food sources, water sources, shot distances, stuff like that. But before you even get into any of that, you might want to consider what the access looks like on a property, because if it's not somewhere that has good access, then a lot of those other factors aren't really going to matter. And so what I mean by that is, in the most basic form, can you get in and out of the property? Or is it going to be off of a minimum maintenance road somewhere? Or is it going to be only accessible with 4x4 or an ATV or a side-by-side, something like that? Like at the high level, can you actually get into the property at all year-round? Is it going to be hard to get in during the wet part of the season in the spring? Is it going to be difficult to get in if there's snowfall? Just consider what that access looks like, but then taking it to the next level, what does the access look like from an actual deer hunting perspective? And so as an example of that, we'll just go into a random property here. You can see you got a road system right here that runs north and south along this property on its east side, and you got a road on the west side that runs north and south. You also have this road on the south side that runs east and west. So what I like about that is you can come into this property 3 different ways off the road, and zooming into a spot like this, there might be a really, really good corridor right in here to hunt deer where you only have to walk in 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 yards off the road, whatever it might be, but it's going to allow you to have clean entrances and exits. And if you think about a prevailing north or west wind in, a lot of the parts of the country, that's what you're going to face, especially in the Midwest if you're deer hunting. Having a road that runs on the east side and runs northwest like this, to be able to come in and get out on that prevailing north or west wind, just makes the property that much more huntable. So envision how you might be hunting the property. What do those prevailing winds look like throughout the year? And can you get in and out of there without being busted by deer all the time? Because as you know, if you've deer hunted long enough, you bust them once, you might get away with it. You bust them twice, you bust them 3 times. Every time you bust deer, it's going to decrease the productivity of that property. So we looked at established roads, county roads, stuff like that, that are probably going to be on the perimeters of the property. But then on the interior of the property, especially if it's a bigger parcel, let's say you're renting 200, 300 plus acres, how are you going to get around within the property? Are there going to be good trails cut? Are there going to be maybe some road systems put in there, or even something that you can just get an ATV and side-by-side around? And thinking ahead, how are you going to get animals out if it's a bigger property? So not only on the external access side and having roads on the outside, but how are you going to get around on the inside? And as a deer hunter looking for a deer lease, you're almost certainly going to want to know when the rut is for a particular area. So it doesn't matter what part of the country you're hunting in, you want to know when that rut is. And thankfully, HuntStand has literally the most accurate, best available tool for that. And you can look at our rut maps. So all you have to do is turn on the nationwide rut map overlay, and you're going to be able to tap anywhere on the map and see exactly when the peak rut date is, and then all the other phases of the rut. And this is the most scientifically accurate rut date system you're going to find anywhere. So as you're doing everything else in HuntStand, you can also find out when those whitetails are going to be rutting specifically for that area. Another big one to consider, is there public land nearby? Now, I know we're talking about getting into a deer hunting lease, so you're going to have exclusive access to what should be a premium property that you can control who's coming and going, have some level of control over the deer herd itself. But deer are free-ranging, big game animals, and unless you're hunting a high fence ranch somewhere where they're actually contained, those deer are going to come and go. So that neighboring pressure could still make a difference on the private access that you have on your hunting lease, but it can also help you. So first things first, just pull up either the public lands or the hunting lands overlays in HuntStand, and you're going to see where there is publicly huntable land around that lease that you're looking at. Now, using this as an example, what I like about it is if you're hunting on the interior of this parcel here, you could potentially during deer season have a bunch of that pressure coming in from the west, pushing those deer into the property that you intend to hunt. And also, even though you're paying to hunt private land under your deer lease, some of that public land that's adjacent to your private land could potentially add to the total huntable area that you have at your fingertips. If it's good ground, it's good ground. Don't just put an imaginary line there in your head and think that you can only hunt the private land. You still have access to that public land as well. So on a piece like this, there might not be a lot of people coming in that far off the road, especially depending on what time of the season it is. You might have a bunch of public land all to yourself just because you have that adjacent access on the private land. So public can work against you or it can work for you if you're getting into a deer hunting lease. The last tool I'm going to mention that you can use in HuntStand as you're looking for a potential deer hunting lease is the property info overlay. So turn that bad boy on and you're going to see landowner names, information, and boundary lines for everywhere in the country. So that can be nice for not only identifying the parcel that you're interested in and being able to go and knock on that door, address that person by name, but also figuring out who the neighbors are. So if you do end up working your way into developing a lease, getting into a lease on that property, you can go door knock, make friends with the neighbors as well. Or even in your discovery process, maybe you want to talk to the neighbors, just get some different perspectives about who's in the area, what's going on around there, and if the piece that you're looking to potentially rent is somewhere that you want to be, depending on the relationship that people have with that landowner. So don't overlook any of this stuff. There are so many different ways you can use HuntStand as you're evaluating different properties for a potential deer hunting lease. And last but not least, make sure you're dropping map markers and taking notes, making sure you mark up all those things that are of interest in HuntStand. You can even build out a hunt area specifically for your deer lease search and then have all your information right in there. So thanks for watching another episode of The Renters. See you on the next one.